let's get
Great,
started.
great.
So, Heidi, pleasure to see you again. Just for disclosure, you and I both went to Pomona College together many years ago. We won't say how long ago that was, but we do go a ways back. And just so people kind of understand my biases, because everybody has one, before we jump in, let me kind of explain my biases. I grew up as a Republican. I worked for a Republican congressperson, but I am also intensely anti MAGA. And so I come at this from a little bit non traditional progressive Democrat standpoint, and we'll probably ask a set of questions that are a little different than what a normal progressive Democrat might ask. But I think there are a lot of people that aren't happy with the direction of government today. And so I think there are a lot of people that are looking for answers. And I'm hoping that, we're able to explore some areas that maybe are not chatted about as much. Sound
Great.
good?
Yeah, great. And I appreciate you taking the time. Actually, this is great.
Yeah, I appreciate you also. All right, so let's go down. Let's get started. Just broadly, Heidi, why don't you tell me kind of what makes you, in your mind, the best candidate for the job?
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of the big question. And honestly, just on there's a number of reasons, but on a very basic level, I live in this district. It's my home. I raised my boys here, and I've served on the Board of Supervisors for 9 years here. That matters a lot because most of the other candidates in this race, including my biggest challenger, do not live in the district, have no experience in this district. And it's the only type of race that allows someone from outside a district to run in it. When I talk to folks on the ground, they want someone who knows what they're living with day by day to be their representative. Beyond that, I would say my experience as a Nevada County supervisor, my experience working within the Democratic Party to try to move it more to the left, my experience as a public servant, all also matter and are fairly unique in this race. So I've been a public servant for 30 years. Almost all of that was in the environmental field. So I have deep environmental um, credibility. I've worked on all kinds of different programs. Bottom line, protecting our land and water and holding corporations accountable for pollution. And then on the board here in Nevada County, I have worked on a politically split board for the entire time. I did flip a red seat blue and won my next two elections handily. And I am proud of what I've been able to deliver to folks here by working across the aisle on things like wildfire mitigation funds, expanding broadband, supporting our public health, been working on home insurance issues for the last 3 years on a state level, and FEMA emergency funds on a national level as well for the last 2 years. So lots of experience on these rural and unincorporated issues. And I've also, been put in the position, so I've been vetted all this time, also been put in the position to have to decide where and when to stand up, which means sometimes not working across the aisle. And that was most prevalent during COVID, when I really had to stand firm to protect our community and our public health staff from folks who were coming in who were opposed to vaccines and were threatening us, trying to dox our public health staff. That went on for 2 years. I did not back down because I knew that my job is to protect people from people with extreme positions that is harmful. So it's in a nutshell.
Sounds good. So, kind of following up on that, right? Your candidate who currently holds the seat sits on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. What committees would you like to serve on if you had your choice when you got to Congress, and why?
Yeah, I love that question. The first committee that comes to my mind, obviously, is natural resources because so much of this area has forested lands, public lands, federal and state, and because that's where a lot of the problems that we have lie. Um, it's also fits in with my natural resource background, my environmental background, and my desire to work on climate change issues and protect our public lands for everyone. The second one would be energy and commerce, and that's specifically because that is where we can move the new Green New Deal forward. On my platform, which we haven't talked about yet, one of the things I want to be doing is leaning into the Green New Deal, eliminating oil and gas subsidies, on making our energy supplies affordable and more resilient. And that's a committee where I can work on that. And then third is oversight and reform. And that's because we need to fix what's wrong with this government. We need to fix the fact that this administration has been able to run roughshod over norms and laws with very little consequences. And we have to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Okay. Given, I'm going to switch the order on a question here because it's a natural follow up to the committee you said you wanted to join. And I wasn't sure which way you would go, so I didn't put it there naturally. So, given you want to be on the Natural Resources Committee, right? Tell us what you think needs to be done to reduce the threat of wildfires, which is actually a big deal for all of us in this district, or many of us in this district. And help understand what part of it you think is a national issue and what part of it is a state issue, because certainly the state has a role. Some could claim they've done a good or poor job, but I think some of it's national and some of it's state. And so help us understand from your perspective which is which.
Sure. Sure. Let's see if I can be succinct. At the national level, I mean, right now there already is a bill that would begin addressing the problems that we have. It's the Fix the Forest Act that Senator Padilla has brought forth. The number one issue we have with the wildfire threat with regard to public lands is that our forests are overstocked, overgrown. They have for over 100 years not been allowed to burn naturally, and that means they're thick and they're huge fire hazards. That means when we get hit, we get a fire start like a lightning threat, it becomes a big conflagration faster. It can create its own weather, which then throws the sparks up to a mile away and creates a whole group of natural occurring fires that turn into these mega fires, which are almost impossible to stop. There's a lot of work that individuals have to do, as well as the state, around their own homes, fire safe clearing, and so on. But at the national level, our forests are just a huge part of the problem, especially for communities like many of ours who live pretty close to those federal areas. I would say the state forests have some of the same problems. The state public lands also need to do a better job of taking care of their public lands. It's the same with BLM, Bureau of Land Management. So there's a lot of places at the federal government and state level where they need to do a better job of taking care of public lands. I would add that the fact that this administration has pulled back staffing from all these places, closing Forest Service offices, closing labs, on top of a program that was already understaffed. So for the last 7, 8 years, at the county level, I've sat on a national association committee that dealt with public lands, and every year I pulled a resolution forward to provide more staffing on our public lands to deal with those issues, as well as recreation and overuse issues. That's a huge problem. I would also say that the fire insurance crisis, although it's not a federal it's a private business problem, but the feds and the states both have a role to play in that. And I raise that because that has become an issue for people trying to buy homes for affordable homes, but it is connected to wildfire. So that's something I've worked on as well in the last 3 years, looking at solutions. And at the federal level, I'll be advocating for a backstop emergency fund like the NFIP with fixes. NFIP is the National Flood Insurance Plan has a lot of problems, but the federal government should be providing some relief there for potential victims. as well as our, the reuse, the insurance companies, the international insurance companies that are not insured and they're scams. We should be regulating them as well. So lots of issues I touched on
Interesting.
there.
So, real quick, let me ask just a follow up because you talked about the forest being overgrown, right?
Mhm.
And certainly jobs are an issue. Is
Right.
is logging those forests part of the solution,
It
which would
is.
would generate jobs and make us safer? And why do you think, at least historically, that's been opposed by the Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, logging is absolutely, yeah, sorry, I didn't get into that right away. So, logging is absolutely a solution. We've come to this place where we've gone from one extreme to another, right? We had loggers coming through decades ago who just stripped whole hillsides, replanted. So, we've got erosion and water quality problems from that. Now we have forests that are all the same age and sort of monoculture, which is also part of the problem. And so the environmentalists, for good reason, wanted to stop that devastation of the landscape and the devastation of the wildlife that depended on those forests. But that pendulum went back too far, right? So
Okay.
now the infrastructure is gone. We no longer have logging companies up here. We don't have even, like, we're looking at biomass. We need to establish biomass programs now. So we do need to go back in and start logging. And I think we can learn from the past so that it is done in a way that is much more sustainable, better for forest health, better for the environment, but still provides wood that we could use to build housing and provides jobs locally.
Interesting. Okay, great. That kind of brings us into the next question, which is, you've mentioned on your website your desire to help small businesses. I read it. I didn't see a whole lot of specifics. So, can you provide kind of a little more specificity around what you would do at the federal level, right?
Mhm.
Because certainly California has some of its own issues with regulations and other types of things.
Right.
But what would you do at the federal level to help small businesses grow?
Well, there's two things that I think we know would work, and I'm sure there's many more that I would want to explore. But the first thing clearly is to remove the tariffs that this government has put on, all kinds of products wantonly without any rhyme or reason. And I know it. I talk to small business owners here regularly, and I'm hearing not everyone and not everyone at the same level, but they all are somehow being affected. Some are deeply affected by these tariffs. They're concerned that they won't be able to survive at all. So we have to remove those tariffs. And if we're going to do any tariffs at all, we need to be very mindful about that. The second thing is that the small business loan program that we have has always been very effective. We could expand that. We could reduce the rates on that. I think it's important that we reward people who are investing in America and especially in their own local communities. So when we talk about taxing businesses, it really we the tax rate is really should be there for those very large businesses who are have the whole investment issue. And I know we'll get into that later, but small mom and pop businesses who are living day to day, often family owned, they need to be given every financial break possible. Small businesses are the backbone of much of this district. Every part that's rural and most of the unincorporated part really rely on those small businesses. So, at a minimum, that's what the feds can do.
So Heidi, just to ask a question on that, right? Um,
Mhm.
so most of the large businesses, I worked for a very large business, and they have whole staffs of people whose sole job is to figure out the loopholes to get around paying taxes, right?
Exactly. Right.
So when we raise corporate taxes, they tend to hit the small and medium sized businesses the hardest because they don't have the high priced lawyers, right? They can't pay for, the smartest guy in the room to figure out how to get around tax stuff. And so when we do raise those corporate taxes, it tends to hit those people the hardest. So
Yeah.
how do you, it's kind of a conundrum because you say, oh, well, I want to raise taxes on the big businesses. Yeah, sure. But when you do it, it often seems to hit the wrong person. So how do you get around that? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, so there has to be an exemption for small businesses when I talk about, their tax rate, the tax, and that's one of your other questions, I think, is that we want to talk about is taxes. The tax rate in this country is truly unfair. It's inverted. The people at the top of the wealthiest folks should be paying their fair share. That includes the corporations. So the big corporations bringing in major monies, the ones that they're then investing. We've talked about this. They're sending their workers overseas. They're giving their CEOs stocks, and then they create this whole system which helps them generate more wealth by paying zero taxes at all when you look at the stepped up basis and other loopholes. So we need to eliminate the loopholes. We need to keep the rates fairly high on those big businesses. Um, and we could be providing more assistance to the small businesses as well. But I don't think those taxes on the small businesses should be raised. I don't think so. And, we talk about 10 employees or less, or you can use other metrics. But again, those folks who are really, living day to day, whose businesses can live or die on a good tourism season, for example, those taxes should be as low as possible.
Okay. So you'd mentioned tariffs and brought that up, right? So U.S. employment from 2004 to 2021 in firms greater than 1,000 have actually declined by 0.5% over that period of time, right? Meanwhile, dividends have gone up 5.6%, stock buybacks have gone up 9.5%, right? But employment hasn't occurred because businesses have outsourced jobs, and that's happened to many people in this district, right? Many people that were in the tech industry were famous for doing that.
Mhm.
So Trump's tariffs, well, I may not necessarily all completely agree with them. They were an attempt to try to bring business back on shore. So
Right.
if you're going to get rid of the tariffs, what is your alternative to keep and grow jobs in the US?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the details of this, but I think at the grand scale, when, like we said, the idea of tariffs, ideally, philosophically, is to increase production at home and decrease the incentive to buy products from overseas, right? And so the opposite of that is to invest in businesses that you want to keep at home. So if there's a business we want to build, if there's manufacturing that we want to build, we should be providing tax breaks to those companies wanting to do that. We can also provide other incentives for them to invest. But I'm not opposed to doing that. I'm not opposed to looking at industry by industry. What is it we want to achieve there? And I do believe also that we should be able to create more businesses in this country so we reduce our dependence on overseas products. I do also believe in free trade. I think having a great system where products can move around the world in a way that makes most sense to the what each country wants to produce. I love that idea, but we have to protect our own businesses and we have to protect our ability to support ourselves to some extent. So I'm not opposed to incentives and tax breaks for those industries that we really want to encourage to build and stay in the United States.
Okay, so let me just ask a little bit of a follow-up question on that, which is, we saw Biden do a lot of investing and funneling federal dollars. And there was a good article in Foreign Affairs that really highlighted that a lot of that government investment ended up driving inflation, right? So is how do you kind of rationalize those things? What's your thought on that? Because sometimes when the government comes in, they come in with an awful heavy hand and they don't always get the response they're hoping for. And I
Yeah.
think some of the inflation we saw was part of that, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I have a great answer for how on the detail level. I think I do think that some of his investments were I know that some of his investments, particularly in infrastructure, were really good. I saw it here at the local level. And I think when you're investing in infrastructure that business depends on, that's one way to help a business, right? To make
Mm-hmm.
sure they have the systems in place that people forget, but that the government provides, the roads, the rails, right?
Right. All that
So
helps business.
all of it helps business. That gets
Right.
forgotten. And investing in infrastructure is something that local communities also desperately need right now. So I would think a focus on that to begin with would be the best place to go. And that also creates jobs. Um, Anything more detailed than that and industry specific, I would really need to sit down and talk to business owners and figure that
Right.
out industry by industry.
Fair enough. All right, let's move in a little bit different direction, which seems to be very topical as of today. The Supreme Court, between making corporations people, making the president above the law, greenlighting national gerrymandering, has started to put our democracy on the path to an illiberal democracy, kind of like Hungary was under Orban. What, in your mind, if anything, should be done?
A lot more than the Democrats are, the sort of the entrenched Democrats who are in office right now. I would say we there's a lot I have to say about this. So let me try to keep it simple to start. First of all, we need to stop this administration in its tracks. We need to stop supporting any of their nominees. We need to stop supporting any more tax breaks that uh, buildings that they want to build. We need to stop the funding, any funding to this war in Iran. Not $1 should be going to that. Um, the just We need to do everything in our power to jam up the gear, because then we're going to have to go in there and unravel this and hold people accountable. So holding them accountable is also part of my platform. Number one, stopping everything. Number two, making them accountable. And then number three, rebuilding and learning our lessons by making our democracy stronger, so that this can't happen again. Um, One of the things that I know that some of the Democrats are trying to do on the Hill, and more need to be doing that, is holding these shadow investigations and going to the court themselves. So I know Ro Khanna worked across the aisle with Thomas Massie to go to court and get some of the Epstein files released. I don't know why every Democrat wasn't doing that. And then we have these shadow investigations that some of the committees are doing. If they can't get their Republican counterparts who are chairing these committees and have control of them, right? They can't do anything about that, but they can set up separate investigative committees and start looking into what's been going on and collecting the data. When this is all over, we need to go back and unravel what happened, and we need to understand it. And these investigations can get that started. So, I mean, those are two. We still have subpoenas. They can go for subpoenas to get the information we need. I mean, the grift and the corruption is so astonishing at such an astonishing level that we really need, our Democrats. That's one of my complaints with my opponent, is that, he's there writing strongly worded letters, sometimes voting along with the Republicans, like on the FISA extension. That needs to stop. It needs to stop completely.
Okay. So no one's happy about the rampant gerrymandering. Certainly, our Republican friends have had their votes, you know, um, taken out. Certainly, Black people now across the South have been disenfranchised.
Um,
Two alternatives sit before Congress. One is instituting third party redistricting committees nationwide. And then the other one is instituting multi member districts with ranked choice voting. Will you co sponsor either of these proposals? And if only one of them, why that one?
Yes. I mean, just to lay the context, I hope we all know that the gerrymandering war started with Texas, started with the president demanding 100 and however many more votes, five more seats. They gerrymandered Texas, and this cascade of gerrymandering has followed, including with California and the changing of the district lines of my own district. I've always, I mean, we had third party districting commissions earlier. They worked pretty well. I've always thought that is the best way to go. It's a state by state decision. So at the national level, we would have to, and we'd have to declare that all states must do that. I'm absolutely for that. We should all go back to that. None of us should be gerrymandering, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats. So I would be happy to co-sponsor a bill like that. I will also say on ranked choice voting, I love ranked choice voting at local levels, what I've seen. And it seems to be working at state levels as well. So I'd love to know more about how that might work. Before sponsoring anything, I'd want to understand that better. When you start going higher up the chain at bigger and bigger elections, I'd really want to understand how that works. But I love the concept, and I think more locals should be using it, and states should be starting to use that as well.
Okay. Do you think the current tax system is fair? And my guess is from what you've already said, the answer is no. So, specifically, how would you propose to change it?
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't think it's fair. I think it gets less and less fair every single day, but it has been unfair for a long time. Clearly, it's just a catchphrase now, but we must make billionaires pay their fair share. People who make more money should be paying more money. Folks at the bottom end of the scale should not have to pay taxes, and the middle class should be paying taxes that are higher than folks who earn less, and certainly lower than folks who earn more. That seems to be really obvious. I do think also we touched a little bit on the loopholes. We need to close those loopholes. They tend to simply, as you noted, benefit people who are already wealthy, benefit people who can invest, benefit people who can take their pay in stocks and then take out loans against those stocks to live their life and let their kids inherit their wealth who then don't have to pay anything on it. So I think we need to close the loopholes in the inheritance tax, corporate gains tax. I also would I would probably institute a wealth tax going in. Closing those loopholes be enough, but it may also not be enough. And to maybe go a little bit further, just to talk about my platform, one of the reasons this is important is because we need to be spending money to help working people live their everyday lives. And that is going to cost money. So where does that come from? It has to come from the billionaires paying their fair share. So repealing that billionaire tax. In my platform, I want us to invest in affordable housing at the federal level, also in universal child care. I want us to be helping our public education institutions, including higher learning. Would love eventually to have free tuition. And I'm for Medicare for all, which will be expensive to institute, but will end up giving us better outcomes at lower prices in the long run. All those things cost money. So if we're not providing tax relief to billionaires, then we can use that money to reinvest it in working people's lives.
So, I think the general thought is, oh, billionaires already pay a whole bunch of taxes. Can you maybe explain in a little bit more detail some of the loopholes you're thinking about, just so people have a clearer idea of, what they are and how they work, and how that might function?
Yes, I mean, so we've talked about this a bit, the stepped up case basis, where sort of, as I think I said, where, CEOs and big corporations, folks at the top of the food chain can take their pay in stocks. Then they send workers, instead of hiring in America at American wages, which still aren't enough, but are better than overseas. They can send parts of their corporation overseas. They can hire overseas workers at really very basic minimum rates, that increases their share, the stock's a value, right? That increases shareholders. Then to live their lives rather than cashing in their stocks, they take loans out on their stocks and live that way. And the stocks can then be passed on. And when they cash them in, this is a very basic explanation that might not be the best. They're not paying any taxes on. So they're avoiding taxes every length of at every part of the chain, and they're not investing in the U.S. They're not providing U.S. jobs. And so it's actually sucking money out of the US, out of the system. And it's the shareholders using the stepped up basis, these loopholes to create more wealth from themselves that stops them from investing, from being able to actually, it's the workers who are doing the work who should be paying more. And they say they don't have the funds for that. They're generating more wealth just for themselves and the folks at the top and the folks who can afford to be investors. Is
So
that
for people that don't know, because I think you've used the term stepped up basis a couple times, what that means is that at the point of death, the stock takes on the value at the point of death, not the value when you received it. So if you sell it right after it's received the stepped up basis, you pay no taxes on your gains because you have no gains because the stepped up basis eliminates them. So, Heidi, it would seem if this was true, then those that are proposing to increase taxes on the wealthy, but not eliminating this this loophole, it's just a red herring. Is that fair?
possibly, I mean, I love the conversations we've had about that. I don't, I have to, I have to look at what it would look like, right? It seems like we need both. We need to raise the corporate tax rate across the board, perhaps less for those folks who are continuing to invest in the United States. Um, and we definitely need to close that loophole. I feel like this is something I'd have to talk to economists about, make sure that we're dialing in the right amount, because those are huge changes, right? Those are going to be huge changes to our income streams. Um, so I'd go stepwise. I do still think we need to raise the corporate tax rate. But maybe that's where we can provide more relief to the smaller businesses by
Okay.
also closing the loophole.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about immigration because, certainly things were crazy. I think that was a big part of the reason that um, Kamala Harris ended up ultimately losing. What do you think should be done about immigration?
So I'll say right out at the gate that I absolutely believe we need to abolish ICE. That organization has become is totally out of control, has become completely militarized. It's rotten to its core. The folks they're bringing in are often criminals. They're not getting the right training. They're not controlled. They don't have an ethic. They're not being supported to be ethical. So we need to stop that now and start that over. Also say that I'm not, while I'm horrified by what this administration is doing, the militarization, the lack of due process, the detention centers, wanton crackdown on anybody who they think might be an immigrant. So they're actually sweeping up citizens. The children, the fact that they're targeting families and taking away children from their parents, this is horrifying me. I have to say, though, that even under the Democrats, they did not do a very good job with this either. Immigration, immigrants in this country are a huge part of our culture as well as our economy. We benefit greatly from them. They pay into the system in many ways. They don't get the benefits back from the system. They support our restaurant businesses, our farms, our construction businesses, as well as being in, higher level career positions. And this works for them and it works for us. So, what we need to do is fully fund an immigration system. We need to hire enough judges so that we can put people through the system in a reasonable amount of time. We should make sure that that immigrants who come in and they aren't criminals should be allowed to stay in the country while they're going through the process to become legal. And that process needs to be sped up so they aren't waiting years and years and living in limbo. I will also say I don't believe in these detention centers, and I have a hard line when it comes to putting children, anyone under the age of 18, in a detention center. So that's a criticism I have for Republicans and Democrats alike. That needs to stop.
So let me just ask a clarifying question because I want to understand something. So when you say you want to abolish ICE, does that mean you want open borders? Because some people may say, well, if you abolish ICE, then everyone's just going to come flooding across the border. So could you
Yeah.
clarify that a little bit, just so
Yeah. Uh,
there?
sure. I mean, what we're talking about, the bulk of the immigrants that we're talking about are not criminals. They're people who are escaping tough times in their own country or violence in their own country, and they have something to offer, and they want to come into this country to offer that. Um, we have to have some way to determine if people are eligible and to keep out people who might have a criminal background. So we do need to have a system at the border that checks people, that makes sure they are eligible. So entirely open borders, I don't think is something we can do right now. But we should be able to afford having those checks at the border and any follow-up enforcement, which should be rare and not extensive. And if we do it right, have enough people at the border, enough judges to make those determinations, so that we don't have the problem you know, that I don't think we even have now. We aren't being overrun by criminals. We aren't. We have a lot of people who haven't gotten their paperwork right, and we've been part of that problem by not getting that paperwork through the system fast enough. So if we do it right at the border, we should not have any kind of a massive problem that we need, and even an organization like ICE to handle.
Okay. All right. So we've talked around a wide range of things, right? And, you know, I've worked in Congress. You've been involved in politics for a long time. It's really hard to do everything, right? So, what if you got elected? What are of all the things we've had a wide ranging set of discussion? What are your top three priorities? What would be the three most important things in your mind to try to get accomplished if you were elected?
Well, I'm probably gonna take some liberties here because this is such a hard question. And because I see actually two sort of parallel tracks, like my
Okay.
absolute priorities are kind of more high level, and I will tell you those. I've already touched on some of them. And then there are actually like bills already in place that I could start working on, that address more, much more particular pieces of those priorities. So my top three priorities clearly are working on this economy, making sure billionaires pay their fair share, making sure we repeal the tariffs, repeal the billionaire tax cut, and invest in affordable housing and childcare and education. That is a top priority. The economy as a whole, to make people living wage, to make sure people have living wages, have decent lives, and the part that's connected to the economy. That's number one. Number two is signing on to Medicare for all, because I do think that healthcare is one of those economic issues, but it's a very specific one. Um, and again, we talked about how to pay for that. Included with that priority, I believe we need to codify our reproductive health rights, because women have had to have this fight over and over again, and I want that to stop. And I know that our rural hospitals are already hanging by a thread. And with the HR1's cuts coming down, we're going to see them get overwhelmed. So I put a particular notice on them as well. I call all of that my second priority. And
Okay.
then my third priority is really stopping this administration, right? I believe our democracy is crumbling. I believe we're already in incipient authoritarianism. The more we let it go on, the harder it's going to be to unravel. So we need to stop it now, which is why I am calling for um, consequences for the illegal and unconstitutional acts. So that means if that's a 25th Amendment or impeachment, it means jail time, it means investigations, and it means fixing our laws so that this probably can't, or so it's going to be much harder for this to happen again. Um, those are my sort of top three. And that's what I'm hearing on the ground. This is what people care about the most right now. They want action on all of these fronts. Because I've been a rural county supervisor for so long and I know the issues so well, there are also things I know I can do quicker. So the Fix Forest Act to deal with our wildfire problem, getting funding out for wildfire mitigation projects. I know how that funding should come and where it should go, so I could work on that right away. Same with affordable housing. There is a bipartisan bill, as I understand it right now, on providing more assistance to housing. And that is a number one issue for our young people, getting more housing built. So I could work on that quickly as well. And then because of my environmental background, dealing with climate change, getting us back in those Paris Accords, repairing our relationships with countries around the world to help work on that. The cost of electricity, the AI data centers, we can get some legislation put forth already as well to get our conversion to alternative energy sources started. So
Yeah,
there's
you took
some
a
things
little liberty with my
I,
top
I took
three,
a
but
lot of liberty, didn't I?
yeah, you did. I think that was six or seven, but that's okay.
It's
I
hard
understand
when
your
you
point.
think about like these big priorities that are really top of mind for people. But
Sure.
then people also want to know, well, what exactly can you do in your first year on all of this? And so
Right.
there are some things I feel like we could do.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So that's kind of my main questions. I'm leaving off a lot of the, you know, cultural flashpoints because they are what they are. Um, do you have, let me just give you a chance to kind of make a summary case,
Mhm.
right? After we've talked through all these things again and you kind of started there, but it's probably good to end there with why you and why you're the best choice for a district that spans all the way from South Sacramento up to Tahoe.
Right. Yeah. Thank you again for that. I let's start with the fact that we have ballots dropping next week, depending on when you post this. Ballots dropping in the beginning of May, and the primary on June 2nd. So this district is now a solid blue district. It's got a lot of people who jumped in the race after Prop 50 because it looked easier. I've been in the race since last year when I got into kick out Kevin Kiley and his MAGA sycophancy. And I've stayed in the race for all the reasons I talked about before, that we need to push back harder on this administration, that I am local to this district, and I welcome the additional parts of Sacramento and Folsom where I've spent a lot of time talking to people about their priorities as well. What's really important is that we get through this primary, somebody viable, solid with experience who can go all the way to the general election. And I believe that I'm the best fit for the district because of my experience, because of my passion, because of my progressive agenda, because I've, run before. I flipped a red seat blue here in Nevada County. I won the next two elections. I've been vetted. I know how this works. Um, and I will say that that I've been endorsed by quite a large number of organizations that show, are, I think, significant for people to understand how serious we can take this race. So most of the environmental organizations out there, the Jane Fonda Climate PAC, California Environmental Voters, Oil Change International, Centers for Biological Diversity, the Sacramento Environmental Dams all have endorsed me. A number of the Sacramento Democratic clubs, the largest, I have the largest majority of endorsements from the Sacramento clubs. So they've clearly leaned in to the fact that they want a progressive, they want someone who lives in the district, and they're ready for a change. I've also been endorsed by the California High School Democrats and the Sacramento High School Democrats. So, really understanding that the young people want someone with a climate change background who is going to put affordable housing right at the top and really knows that I care about creating a place where young people can go after the American dream again, which they really have lost at this point. I'll also just wrap up the endorsements with I've got 38 local county supervisors up and down the state who've endorsed me. They've worked with me over the last 9 years. They know that I listen, that I learn, that I can get things done, that I'm persistent and effective. And so I can bring all of that, those same skills with me to Congress. Bottom line, I think I'm the best fit. I believe I'm the best fit for this district. I believe the skills that I have and all the work that I've done, I can level up to be a very effective congresswoman for this district. And I'd be honored to have everyone's vote.
Great. Well, thank you. I think that's a good ending. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I hope you have great success.
Thank you so much, Dave, for taking the time and for the great questions and for digging in on some of that stuff. I think that's very helpful for people to get a chance to get to know me. So I appreciate you very much.
You're welcome. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.